Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, depending on what part of the world you're visiting us. Hi, I'm Daniel Marcos. I'm the host of the podcast Impact X, how the best leaders give 10 times the impact with half the drama. And today I'm super, super excited. I'm here with Liz Wiseman. I met Liz like 15 years ago, read her book, Multipliers, and significantly changed my life. We're going to talk about that. And then some of her other books. Let me just do a quick introduction and then we'll start the conversation. Liz is a researcher and an executive advisor who teaches leadership to executives around the world. She's the author of the New York Times bestseller Multipliers. That's her first book. And then she has written three more other books: The Multiplier Effect, the Wall Street Journal bestseller Rookie Smarts, and Impact Players. And we're also going to be talking about Impact Players a lot. She's the CEO of the Wiseman Group, leadership research and development firm headquartered in Silicon Valley, and has helped companies like Apple, AT&T, Disney, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Nike, Salesforce, Tesla, and Twitter. You could just have a mouthful of the best companies in the world that Liz has coached. Liz, how are you?
I am doing well. It's good to talk with you.
Same. Thank you very much for the time. As I said, and you and I have talked this many, many times, Multipliers really changed my life. I was a very, very young entrepreneur and had no idea what it was to be a leader. And then they recommend your book, Vern recommended your book, I read it. And of course, when you get the book, you always said, of course, I'm a multiplier, right? I'm a successful entrepreneur. And you read it, of course. And then you start reading it and you start getting depressed. You realize you're a accidental diminisher. And by the way, what an elegant way to tell us what's happening with us, the accidental diminisher. So first, how did this methodology, how the book came up? Why do you start writing this? What happened in your life that you learned that you start writing these books?
Well, all of my books are really inquiries into things that seem important that I don't understand well enough. And this was one of them. And I joined this young, rapidly growing software company right out of college. And it was relatively unknown at the time. All my friends thought I went to work for a toothpaste manufacturer because it was called Oracle. And so I was young, the company was young, I'm thrown into management, and I'm trying to figure out how to lead. And I'm watching the leaders around me, and I'm seeing this dynamic play out over and over again, where we hire really, really smart people. We put them into management. And those really smart people are so smart that they end up dumbing down their teams. It's like their intelligence ended up becoming a weapon rather than a tool. And I saw how sometimes the smartest leaders struggle to build really intelligent teams that can think and solve problems because those teams were so either suppressed by these egomaniac, brilliant leaders, or they just deferred to their brilliant leaders. Like, it wasn't like the leader was actively trying to kind of squash insight and innovation and capability. It's that everyone just looked to them like, you mentioned Twitter and Tesla. So it's like, in some ways, people just look to Elon Musk like, well, he's smart. He'll figure it out. Like, he doesn't need me. And we end up just deferring to them. But then I saw other really, really smart leaders whose intelligence seemed infectious to me. Like, other people were at their best around these leaders. Other people were at their smartest, most assertive, took ownership, took responsibility. Like, we kind of step up around certain leaders and then hold back around others. And I saw that and didn't have a name for it. And it wasn't until I went out and started coaching, kind of making my rounds around Silicon Valley, where there's a lot of really smart people in senior positions, that I saw a lot of them had this diminishing effect on their organizations. And then, Daniel, honestly, I was just looking for some research to try to quantify and explain what I had seen over and over again. And honestly, what I had struggled with myself. Like, I think we've all struggled with this. And that's really what led to the research and the book.
How do you came up with the diminishers term? Because it's hard to tell someone that they're not doing the right things. And I think you made it in a very elegant way that you're an accidental diminisher. And how do you came up with the term, and what was the things that you found that makes someone to be a diminisher?
Well, I think that I came up with the term, just trying to describe what I saw is that they had this diminishing effect on others. And it wasn't until I really honestly, I started this seeing like, oh, there's these amazing multipliers and then these sort of darn diminishers. And then I'm like, wait a minute, it's far more nuanced than this. And I could see how so few of what I could see is, as I was telling people I was working on the book, I would describe it to them and they would be like, oh, that's so great. Like, I love that. Like, I'm a multiplier. And I'm like, wow, I've interviewed people who worked for you. Because, Silicon Valley is a tight-knit community. And that's where I started my research. And I realized, wow, that person was somebody else's named diminisher. When I asked them, who is someone around whom you struggled to like get blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, they have no idea that they're having a diminishing effect. And there was this one woman who read an early copy of the book, and she said, that was the most painful thing I've read, which interestingly enough, okay, Vern said the same thing. He like, Liz, that book was painful. I'm like a painful read or a painful reflection. Those are different. But this woman said, it was painful for me because I feel like I have the heart of a multiplier. It's very much how I see myself. It's what I want to be as a leader, she said. But I realized in reading it that I've been living in diminisher land so long that I've gone native on this. Like, I've become a diminisher because all of my role models are. And that's where I was really fascinated by how we end up having a diminishing effect with the heart of a multiplier or with the very best intent, doing things we think is going to generate ownership, ideas, accountability, like all these things that look like they're going to grow businesses that actually, if you really kind of look at the chain reaction, it has a diminishing effect. And that's what was fascinating to me. And it is accidental most of the time. It's over 60% when we quantify it.
And I get a lot of times that I'm coaching a company and someone comes to me and pulls me to the corner and said, hey, my boss is terrible. How can you tell them that you're a diminisher without really offending them and help them to grow on that? What's your recommendation? What do you tell a diminisher?
Well, you don't buy them the book and drop it on their desk and run. Like I might sell some books, but it's not going to change them. Here's what is the path of learning is it's easy for us to see people who are diminishing us. It's harder for us to see it in ourselves because our intentions are good. And even that person that you're working with that feels like an abject diminisher is probably operating with the intent to be something other than that. And so the way, like the path of learning is to understand how we do it with the best of intentions. And so trying to help someone see that they're like a tyrannical, bossy bully is probably not going to be a very productive conversation. But helping someone see how their best intentions can go awry is possible. And the way to do it is not to sit your boss down and say, well, like, I really want to talk about your intent versus your impact. For some, you might have that relationship with your manager, but I think the way to start that conversation is to talk about your own accidental diminishing tendencies. And when you raise that topic in a group, as a collective, like with a work team or with a whole company, it's so easy for the senior leaders to go, oh yeah, I have accidental diminisher tendencies. And the more we make them, and the more that we take it out of the taboo topic of like bad boss and shame, and it's shameful to be diminishing others. And the more we make light of it, actually, and we sort of laugh about the ways that we can accidentally diminish. Like for me, I'm an idea fountain. Like, hey, super creative, thinking about things. I'm always tossing out ideas. And it took me a while to figure out that my need for ideation was creating chaos on my team. Like, well, okay, Liz, do you want us to go do that? Or are you just having an idea party? But the more we can laugh, like the more my team laughs at me, they're like, Liz has got her idea fountain going again. Or the more you can laugh about someone being like a big-hearted rescuer. Like, hey, boss, like I don't need a rescue. Like I got this, but I appreciate love the love, but I've got this. I'll get this across the finish line. So the more we talk about these accidental diminisher tendencies with a lightheartedness, the more it creates permission for people to push back against the diminishing.
And it has to be kind of a self-discovery, what I'm hearing. Like you have to create the environment for them to discover on their own. You cannot tell them directly. And by the way, it happens, the decision maker that you always talk about, that they decide and then they ask for debate. I coach a lot of CEOs, and as soon as I come into the room, I said, you're not allowed to talk in front of everyone. That you have to go at the end. They just can't hold themselves.
I know.
They just at the beginning said, we need to do this. What do you think? And they were like, okay.
Yeah. But here's the thing. I think we underestimate, I would kind of put bluntly, I think we forget that executives are humans because they hold these, like they have to exhibit this strength that makes them seem like superhumans. But I think we forget that like our boss is a human too. And we talk a lot about what leaders need to do to create safety on their teams, psychological safety, intellectual safety. And it's one of the things that, like, if I could sum up multipliers into 2.5 words, it would be safety and stretch. Like what these leaders do is they create an environment where people feel heard, they listen, people feel empowered, they're trusted, they can make mistakes, they have a sense of belonging, they know what's important, like lots of safety. But safety without stretch is as diminishing as stretch without safety. So this is what's that?
It's a pretty thin line between both.
It is. It is. But when those are put together in equal measures, people do their best work. Okay, so that's what good leaders do for their teams. But here's what I think we forget is that our bosses require that same sort of condition. So we think that we should be able to just go into our boss's office and be like, well, you're having a diminishing impact. I need more space. You need to pull back. Like you're asking them, that's a stretch. You're asking them to change. You're asking them to like reflect. You're asking them to stretch their thinking, but you haven't created safety for that. And they, owing to the fact that they are humans as well, not machines, not bots, like they need that kind of same safety. And so like when we talk about our own accidental diminisher tendencies, we're making that safe for them to say, oh, I think I see this thing I'm doing with the best of intentions that's actually holding my team back. Wow, I could probably do something about that.
So what's the best way to start being a multiplier? Well, like, what do you recommend someone who said, okay, I get it. I'm an accidental diminisher. I need to change. And they come to you open and willing to learn. What do you recommend them to?
Well, there's probably a practice. There's a multiplier practice that I think is like an antecedent to the rest of them. It's sort of at the beginning of the path. It's just making a simple shift out of telling and shift into asking. Instead of giving answers, ask questions. Instead of jumping to conclusions, start an inquiry process. And, one way to do that is to take what I call the extreme question challenge, which is it's not a permanent way of working. It's a temporary challenge. It's to go into, maybe you pick 1 or 2 meetings and you go into that and say, in this meeting, I'm going to ask only questions. No statements, no directives, no opinions, no validations, no like, oh yeah, I agree. That's great. Wonderful. Just questions. And it's hard. It's really hard. But I found with myself and other people who have taken this challenge, it really starts to change and rewire your thinking as a leader. That's a practice that will very much put you on this path to being more of a multiplier. There is also kind of, I don't want to say an easier way, but a bit of a shortcut. And that is to just talk so openly about your accidental diminisher tendencies that people stop you from having a diminishing effect.
But they tell you, hey, you're having a diminishing effect now, or the way they react to you, or what happens when you openly talk about it?
So let's talk about, so here are some of the accidental diminisher tendencies. I'm going to rattle them off in hoping that as people are listening, they might think, oh, that one's me. So let's see, idea fountain, always on, rescuer, pace setter, the protector, keeping people from difficult things, the perfectionist, the optimist, the strategist. So these are some of the things. So like, let's say if people know that I have rescuer tendencies, I tend to be quick to help people who are struggling. And I do it because I'm big-hearted. I love and care about people. If everyone knows about that, it gives them permission to say, I've got this. And then problem is solved. Like, people are pushing back gently against accidental diminishing. Let's say I have protector tendencies that, I tend to like do the hard things and shield the people on my team from the difficulty so they can focus on their work. Like when a hard conversation comes up or a difficult client, it gives someone the opportunity to say, you know what, I know this one's going to be miserable. Why don't you let me take it? Like, I'm never going to learn to stand on my own here unless I go and deal with that. And then it's like, okay, yeah, let's go do that. And so you don't have to, in some ways, reinvent yourself as a leader. You just have to make it safe for people to say, no, let me do this. Or last one, let's say you've got perfectionist tendencies.
Yep.
What it allows me to do is, if you're my boss, Daniel, and you've got perfectionist tendencies, and maybe you're starting to tweak this, it gives me the chance to say, Daniel, is this one that has to be perfect? Or like, at what level does this job need to be done? Like, okay, it just needs to be error-free, but it doesn't need to be formatted perfectly. Great. You know what? This thing is error-free, formatting, it's not my best work, but it's good for now. And you go, yeah, okay, this is good. So it allows people to figure out like what needs to be perfect and what needs to be just good enough, because not everything needs to be perfect.
Yeah. And you have to learn how to be like that. It's not common sense at the beginning, and it's hard for a lot of you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's in some ways, it allows you to coach your leader and help them figure out like in some ways how to apply their own strengths.
Let me connect that with Rookie Smarts, because that's a lot of what we teach, that you want to be a lifelong learner. And what happened in Microsoft, by the way, amazing change from a know-it-all to a learn-it-all. And you saw the valuation multiplied by 6, and it's just an amazing company. And by the way, when I talk about multipliers, you show how you could double the productivity of a team just changing the leader from a diminisher to multiplier. In Microsoft, it was 6 times the valuation. It was crazy. And that's, you change one out of the 180,000 and you have that impact. So why learning beats knowledge? And with all this changing world, why is that so important?
Well, I think it's about the ephemeral nature of what we know right now. I think I did a calculation for the book. Let me see if I can remember it. When you look at anyone who works in a job that's heavily influenced by technology, with, STEM, science, technology, engineering, math related, or your business is heavily technology infused. When you look at the rate at which like knowledge and information is growing and expanding and what people need to know, and you look at the obsolescence rate at how quickly things that were true are no longer true, at the obsolescence rate, and you bring those two data points together, I was shocked. I had to redo the calculation several times. In that environment, only 15% of what we know is likely to be relevant in 5 years. So that's not 50 as in half, that's 1/5.
Wow.
And of course, we don't even know which 15% that is. And so like the art form is not about dispensing knowledge, which ends up diminishing in leadership roles as well. But it's about how fast we learn and about our ability to let go of what we do know. And so, in this environment, it's not what we know that matters. It's truly how fast we can learn and unlearn. And this is the environment where people who either are rookies, newcomers to a market, to a job, have a distinct advantage, and people who can keep their brain in this rookie mode.
When you have someone that is around you that said, no, I already know what to do. I'm going to tell you what to do. And they don't want to learn, they want to grow. What recommendation do you have? Because we have a lot of our leaders that they grew to a certain place. And like Salim Ismail says, you create this immune system because now you believe you're great and then you don't allow that to change. Well, how can you bring that similar to the diminisher to tell them they're a diminisher to want to become a multiplier?
Well, I think it's about calculated failure, because there are some people who can learn in up times, like they can, and when everything is going well, they can learn. And then there are other people or other times when you can only learn from your failures. And, Daniel, you're a father. I'm a mother of 4 kids. And I think coaching executives is a lot like this. Like there were lessons that I'd say, okay, my child isn't learning this one on their own. Or they're not learning it from me. They're not learning it from conversation and exploration and conceptualization. They're going to have to learn it by experiencing it. And there's a story I tell in the Multipliers book that was so poignant for me. And it was about my 3-year-old son, and we're on a beach, and he keeps, because he's a 3-year-old and because he is who he is, he was always drawn to danger, and he would always go out into the waves, and I'd pull him back and go, no, you got to stay here in the baby waves. And then he kept going out, and it was this comical scene of us back and forth on this beach, him toddling out, me pulling him back. And finally I'm like, he's not learning this one from mom. No matter how much I tell him about the power of the ocean and that those waves are actually more dangerous than they seem, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to let a wave take him. And take him down, not like take him off the sea. So I'm watching for this perfect wave. And it's not like a perfect wave in the surfer kind of definition. I want a wave that is going to tumble him and scare him, but not sweep him off to sea. And so I'm watching, ooh, that one's too big, hold on to him. That one's too little. And then I see this wave come. I'm like, that's my wave. And I step back. And there I got some looks from other parents on the beach, like, what are you doing? And because it was comical. What was happening on the beach was funny. And so I just stepped back and I let the wave take him, and it really tossed him. And he kind of came up for air, and he's spitting out sand, and he looked at me like, Mom, where did you go? And I'm like, and that's where I'm like, Christian, the ocean is really powerful, and it's more powerful than you think. And he's like, I've got it. And it turns out that 3-year-old has grown up to be this amazing surfer and mountaineer. But it's about sizing the failure, right? Like you can't just let someone destroy a company if you can help it. You can't, but you also don't want to keep them so safe they never learn. And so it's about sizing that wave right. Like, what is a lesson that it's going to teach them that they're screwing this up without being, career ending, business ending, life ending for someone. And I do think people who serve as coaches, executive advisors, sometimes have to figure out, how do I let this person toss and tumble in the sand? Because those are the ones we learn.
But then you have to accept that they learn different things in different ways, and you have to accept that they got it. Quick story. You were telling the story, I had a team member. He was head of customer success, and one day he came and said, "Hey, I want to hire this person. Came from American Express. All this training. He's going to be amazing." And I interviewed the guy, and I just didn't like him. I said, "This is going to be a disaster." So I said, "I don't think you should hire the guy." And she was really, really strong. This is perfect. I'm going to hire him. I said, "Fine." So they hired the guy, and 2 months into it, she comes to my office one day, almost crying, and said, I made the worst mistake. It's been really, really bad, and I've been struggling for 2 months. I just cannot stay quiet. And I was like, great, fine. And she looked at me and was like, you knew it was going to happen. And I was like, I didn't know exactly,
but you knew.
I felt. And she said, why do you allow me to hire the guy? Like, it costed like $10,000 a couple of months, stuff like that. And I was like, you had to learn. That's part of the game. And she was so thankful for the process that I was accepting to make the investment. After that, all the new hires, they've been amazing after that.
Daniel, I love the story. I'm getting like kind of goosebumps in hearing you tell that, because it's the environment you created, not that allowed her to do it. That's the straightforward part of this story. It's the environment you created that allowed her to come back and say, I screwed this up. And that is the magic of good leadership, is creating an environment where people can take ownership and make mistakes, but they also feel safe enough with you that they can come back and admit their own mistakes. Yeah. And the point that like the hiring was brilliant after that is worth the price that you paid
10 times
to get that. And I think, it's not just the bullheaded, the stubborn, the brilliant kind of leaders and contributors who have to learn through their own mistakes. We all learn from our own mistakes. And so creating, but you mentioned I live here in sort of the heart of Silicon Valley, where the mantras are like, fail fast, fail forward, fail big. Like, failure is not a great business strategy. So it's not about just like unleashing failure. What we want is not failure. We want learning. And that's what I think we overlook. Is like, how do you create
an environment? Learn from failure. Yeah. So they have to learn from failure.
Yeah. And you did that. You created this environment where she could experiment, suffer the consequences of it, and learn from it and adjust. So it's about how do we size that wave right? How do we say, okay, you know what? Like, we can afford one wrong hire. We can't afford an entire stream of it. Like, what's affordable failure?
Yeah, depending on size of the company. But yeah, indeed, I like one of the letters that Jeff Bezos wrote to his investors. He said, I hope that you're very happy for our many big billion-dollar successes. But I hope that you understand that the more billion-dollar successes we have, the more billion-dollar mistakes we're going to make. And he said in one of the letters, just kind of explaining. And he was not apologizing, but kind of explaining that big failure that they lost over $1 billion. And he was saying, but it's part of having a lot of billion-dollar successes. We're going to have some of the failures. It's part of the game.
Yeah. In many ways, I think, like, I think in terms of like, what are all the competencies leaders need to be good at? But I'm always looking at what are the ones that like you truly have to develop mastery of. Like, sizing the stretch right, I think, is one of them. Asking great questions is one of them. I think one of the other like things good leaders need true mastery of is that, like, how to help people recover, like that recovery process, helping individuals recover, helping teams recover, helping businesses recover. Like, I think we don't talk enough about what has to happen for acknowledgement and recovery and like redemption to happen after we've screwed something up.
That's it. That's your next book. There's nothing around in the market on how to recover.
It's funny. I mentioned this idea to my publisher several years ago. I was looking at things I would be interested in writing about, and I mentioned that, and I'm like, I'm really interested in this recovery process. She said, people don't buy books on screwing things up. I'm like, but we should. We should.
No, they would. I really believe they would. They have to be in a certain space in their life. But I think it's an amazing book about it.
And I think it's an art form, and like people who recover well, and I think you look at athletics, like being able to recover after you've made a mistake and get yourself back in position. And yeah, I think there's an art form to it.
Okay, and before we close, let me just spend the last 5 minutes. Impact players. That's your last work. Why impact player? What makes an impact player?
Oh, so here's why I wrote the book is, I'd been teaching people how to be multiplier leaders, and it was Salesforce, and I'm teaching this workshop, and one of the engineering managers, he raises his hand. He's like, hey, I get it. I want to be a multiplier leader, but you can't multiply 0. And I'm like, whoa, what's that about? And I tell you, Daniel, I'm about to launch into this diatribe about how, everyone on your team has some form of brilliance and capability, and your job as a leader is to see it and use it. Because I'm thinking he's saying, I got a bunch of dummies working for me. Now, Salesforce generally doesn't hire a lot of dummies, but that's what I think he's saying is like, I'm not working with good raw materials. What he was saying was entirely different. What he was saying is, yes, as a leader, I need to bring the right mindsets, the right practices to help people contribute at their best. But so do the people on my team. Like, they have to show up with the right kind of mental game and the right sort of habits. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is definitely a 2 to tango kind of relationship. Is the leader needs to create this environment of safety and stretch, but what do people do in that environment? And so what I did was study, what is it that the most impactful people do differently? And we asked managers, 170 of them, to identify 2 people on their team. Someone who was making a perfectly solid contribution, rock solid, ordinary contributors, versus what I called the impact players, the people who were making an extraordinary contribution, bringing extraordinary value, and really making a difference in the organization. These are the people around whom like businesses scale around these kind of people. We found that the impact that they were creating was 3.5 times greater. And we found that kind of in essence, what we found is that the ordinary contributor were these kind of stellar team players who took ownership, who did their jobs well, brilliantly, who followed direction, who were focused, who carried their weight on teams. But they were stellar in ordinary times. But as soon as situations got fraught with ambiguity, uncertainty, a little bit of chaos, this like rock solid way of working fell short. And this is where the impact players thought about the situations differently. They handled them differently. There were 5 things they did very differently when problems got messy and roles were unclear and unforeseen obstacles are dropping in the path and targets are moving and the workload is just increasing, never decreasing. And so it's really about how to handle ambiguity and what the most impactful people do differently.
I haven't read that. I need to read it. But it sounds like, so I was having a conversation with an employee a couple of weeks ago that he's leading a department and I have a rule that if you want someone to replace you, you have to train that person, select and replace them. So if you want to go to a next level, you have to have someone to replace you. So I told him, great, who do you think is going to replace you? And he said, well, this person. And I was like, I'm not sure. And he said, why? Have you seen anything bad about the person? And I was like, no, he's great. But I have never got an unsolicited congratulations of the person. From you, I get every week. Everyone tells me about you every week, how amazing you are. Never get from this other team member. He gets all the job done. But I never get an unsolicited recognition about how great they are.
It's interesting, you say the other person got the job done, and it is one of the 5 differences when problems are messy, and they're sitting in the white space of organizations. It's like not your job, it's not his job, it's not that department's charter, it's not your department's charter, it's just this problem. We find that the ordinary contributor, they do their job, and they do their job brilliantly. But the impact player goes into that messy space and they do the job that needs to be done, which is what prompts unsolicited things like, man, we had this thing and it was messy and no one else was going there. But this person, kind of like they metaphorically got up from their chair, their post, and said, let me go see if I can figure that thing out. And managers love them. Yeah, they're real difference makers in the organization.
It's a main difference. All right. Liz, you left me a lot of homework. I haven't read this book, so I'm going to start reading it tonight. Hey, thank you for what you do. I think you help all these really big companies and very successful companies, but you do it in a so simple, very relatable way that it's very relatable to everyone at every level in the companies at every level. So that's why we're big fans of you in the mid-markets, because all these tools that you learn from the big ones, you brought with data and research in such a simple way, like the accidental diminisher. I think that was like so clever and so simple. Thank you.
Well, I just try very hard not to complexify things for the sake of complexifying. And then I do think good leadership, like it's hard and it's complex, but usually when you get down to what is the right thing to do, it's usually something very simple. Like it's finding simple truths.
But some people, some thought leaders, they like to sound intelligent and they make it sophisticated so they sound intelligent.
Yeah, but
you bring it to a format so comprehensible that it's great. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And as I said, it changed my life.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that. I mean, and I've just got done studying these impact players, and it really is what fuels people at work, is knowing that their work has impact, that they're not just doing a job. It's that they're making a difference in people's lives. And, if I could ask managers to do like one thing right now, particularly as we've come out of a pandemic and people are working remote and feeling isolated and we're dealing with very complex economic conditions, is like help people see what's important so they can go do the job that's needed, not just sit in their chair, and help people see how their work has impact. Like, wow, you did this thing. This is what happened. And this is what we were able to do. Like, help people see that chain of causality between my work and the impact for the organization, because that is what fuels people.
Love it. Liz, as always, thank you very much. We'll stay in contact and we'll look forward to learn more from you.
So good to talk with you.
Same to you. Thank you. Hey, by the way, sorry, last thing. Where can I look for you if there's someone to learn more about you?
Oh, let me see. You can find more about me. I'm pretty easy to find on social media. Twitter at Liz Wiseman, LinkedIn, Liz Wiseman.
Where are you the most?
The Wiseman Group.com, and that has links to all the books. Multipliersbooks.com, Impact Players book.
In a certain social media that you're the most active?
Maybe Twitter. Maybe.
But you're everywhere. Like a lot of you're in LinkedIn. Every conference.
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn a lot too.
All right. We'll look for you on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.